Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is The Brave and the Bold, issue number 99, dated January 1972. And in this issue, we have Batman, and he is teamed up with the Flash in what is one of the worst comic books I have ever read. The story is atrocious. The way the Batman character was portrayed was atrocious. Thank God DC didn't care too much about continuity. Because if Marvel had released a comic like this on one of their major characters, and given how much they care about continuity, it would have ended the title right there. But thankfully, this issue was kind of glossed over. And it's really surprising because it's written by Bob Hanley, who was actually doing a lot of good work in Brave and the Bold around this time. But this story is absolutely terrible. The only thing I can liken it to is, imagine you're buying a regular edition of The Amazing Spider-Man, and the story in it is a Spidey super story. That's the degrees of difference between how this character is normally portrayed and what you see in this pile of crap that is issue number 99. We take a look at the cover, and the cover's really nothing special. It looks like Neil Adams was involved, but this issue is so bad that even a contribution by Neil Adams, no matter how small, doesn't help. We see the Flash in the background here. He's inexplicably holding Batman at gunpoint. Nowhere in this story does a gun appear. And we see Batman kind of having this sort of, existential crisis here. He kind of looks a lot like Two-Face, where the normal half of him is saying, "Kill me," before the demon in me takes over. And then the demonic part of Batman here is saying, "No, he's lying. There's no demon in me." So this is sort of a supernatural story, or at least a story that has the supernatural, which was not necessarily that unusual with Brave and the Bold, because Deadman was making a lot of appearances, and they were talking about rebooting the Spectra. So obviously, at some point, he was going to show up in Brave and the Bold. And I think that happened a year later. I sort of get the feeling that maybe Bob did not really want to write this story, and he kind of was a little bit of passive-aggressive about it. That's the only way I can explain it. But nevertheless, this got past the main editors, and they actually allowed this thing to go on the newsstand. There's also a second reprint, because this is one of those 48 pages for only 25 cents issues. These issues were a disaster for DC financially. But I won't get into that right now. But the second B story is a reprint of the Viking Prince, and I'm going to kind of skip over that story. The first page is not a traditional splash page. It goes right into this story. We see Batman. He's in his full regalia with the Batmobile, and he's actually on a ferry heading to a New England island. This is sort of like the island that we saw in Jaws, the Amity Island. In fact, Batman, who honestly, I wish he would have kind of been investigating that mayor.
It's all psychological. You yell barracuda. Everybody says, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Because if you remember Jaws, the mayor was really the villain of that story. The way he was sending in his own citizens into the water knowing that there was a shark is crazy. Batman should have been investigating that crime instead of the garbage that was going on here. But nevertheless, I'm going to pass on that. So Batman, he's on this ferry, and he's heading to this small New England kind of fishing village. And it turns out that this place has a lot of memories for Batman. Because it's explained in the first panel that Batman had this overwhelming urge to return to this place. And it turns out that it's actually where the Wayne family summer home was. The home is still there, but it's no longer being used as the summer home, because apparently it had been long abandoned. But Batman, when he was Bruce Wayne, young Bruce Wayne, he had a lot of great memories of this place. So right now we're like literally two panels in. So this is kind of shaping up. You kind of see Jaws a little bit here, and now it's kind of turning. It will turn into sort of Beetlejuice later on. So anyway, Batman, he enters the home. The home is not in good repair at this point. Apparently, nobody in the Wayne Foundation or Bruce Wayne himself decided to upkeep this very expensive place. So it kind of has a haunted house feel to it. Batman here, he sees a couple of items from his childhood. And then we're treated to a flashback here where we see young Bruce Wayne, and he's fishing with his father on the beach. And it looks like young Bruce has caught a bluefish here. His dad is very proud of his son, saying that was a nice catch of a bluefish. But more precisely, this is the scientific term. So this is sort of, on one hand, kind of giving us an idea where Batman sort of got that anal retentive nature of his to pronounce things as their proper scientific name. But on the other hand, the thing is that the Bruce Wayne, the young Bruce Wayne in these flashbacks, looks to be around 13 or 14 years old. And it's been established in canon that he was about 10 years old when his parents were murked. So again, Bob Hanley's he's not putting much care into this story. Also, some of the dialogue here is really bad. And so no one really put much care into this story overall. We see young Bruce, he's playing well in tennis. We see Batman here. He's holding his old tennis racket, kind of looks like a badminton racket. He's kind of thinking of the old days, back when he used to beat his dad on the tennis court here. And probably dad beat his ass afterwards. But nevertheless, he has, good memories of what's going on. And he's thinking to himself, Dad, Mom, dead. So long now. But this house holds so many memories of them. And we see a large portrait of Thomas Wayne here. And behind the portrait is a wall safe. And in the wall safe is an urn that has the ashley remains of Thomas and Martha Wayne. I honestly do not know if this is a thing, where if, say, two people or more than two people, they die, they're cremated, and all their ashes are kind of mixed into one urn. I honestly do not know if that's a thing, but this is what's going on here. The urn kind of looks like a gin bottle. It's okay. I guess it's fine. People had those habits back then. Batman, he's holding the urn. He's thinking of his parents' ashley remains. Dad, Mom, all that's left of them, their ashes. And we see kind of Batman here. He's going through a great deal of grief. Then at this point, a sudden wind blows the front door opened. And now it kind of looks like a scene from The Fog, if you remember that 1980 film by John Carpenter here. So this is sort of giving a real haunted house look. And we do hear that there are noises coming from outside. That's not just the weather. And then we see Batman kind of quietly and silently walking out of the summer home. He's still in his full regalia, But at this point, he's sort of walking differently than he normally would. He's walking a bit stiffer. He's walking with a limp, and he's more like kind of lurching forward rather than walking forward. And this is to indicate that he has been possessed. And this story is mostly Beetlejuice here. So Batman at this point has been possessed by an old fisherman who's a legend in this village, who had died 50 years earlier on a day like this in weather like this. So again, this is a supernatural story, and I don't mind kind of giving spoilers because it's really not worth it to talk about this story unfolding. And now we get what is, I guess we can kind of deem the splash page, because we're given the title of this story, and it's called The Man Who Murdered the Past. And the creative team, the art is by Bob Brown and Nick Cardy. Neither one of these two helped the other. The art here is really pedestrian, and it's kind of just, kind of hackish, to be honest. We see the stories by Bob Hanley. Bob did a terrible job on this story. Bless his heart for cashing that check for it. But nevertheless, they printed it. No one else's name appears. So even they recognize this story is kind of a stinker. So it turns out that Batman, he's walking toward, I guess we could say the village bar, for lack of a better word, the tavern, I guess. This is sort of like a tavern inn here. And they do have some of the regulars here, and they're kind of just, I guess, spending their time. The weather's really bad. You figure television reception is probably awful. So they probably have nothing better to do at this point than to sort of just hang out at the old tavern here. And they're talking about old times.
Here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
They're talking about old Emmanuel. He's the Portuguese harpoonist who had died 50 years earlier. And so it's already a little bit convenient here that they're already talking about this particular character. So this character is currently in the consciousness of the townfolk. Batman comes into the tavern. The patrons seemed mildly surprised, but not terribly surprised. Apparently, what had happened is that Batman had rented the summer home from Bruce Wayne. This is the story that the citizens of the village have been told. I guess probably Batman was talking to the fairy guy, and the fairy guy kind of like was gossiping to the townfolk here. So again, a little bit more plot convenience in that, it doesn't have to be explained that how come they know Batman's here? They kind of already know the situation. Batman, he's speaking as old Emmanuel, saying, "Ho, amigo, some rum. My thirst, she is great." And the barkeep is noting that he's speaking and moving the same way that old Emmanuel used to walk and talk. The barkeep, he's telling Batman here that they only serve soda here. So this is like a non-alcoholic tavern here. My guess is that that's a complete lie. They realize how bad Batman is acting. And this guy's saying, this guy's already had enough alcohol, so I'm not going to give him anything else. But then momentarily, Batman is basically back to being who he is. So he's been depossessed. The spirit, when the spirit possesses Batman, it's sort of an on-off thing, where old Emmanuel, when he's possessing Batman, he isn't doing it for very long. So there seems to be, at this point, at least some type of time limit to how long old Emmanuel can possess Batman. The barkeep, he's treating this as Batman's playing a joke on them. saying, "Listen, the legend of old Emmanuel is known everywhere. Batman, he knows we're talking about him, and he's just kind of playing a little joke here, a little prank." Batman is kind of somewhat playing along with it, in that he actually is aware of who old Emmanuel is. And again, he had heard stories about this character when he was a kid, when him and his family would vacation here on the island. So Batman's gonna leave the tavern at this point, but nevertheless, he's kind of thinking about what was going on, and he's at this point he doesn't suspect anything supernatural. He's just thinking that there's been a lack of sleep, and he also notes that the storm is over. So again, probably the storm had something to do with old Emmanuel's spirit showing up at that time at the summer home. Now we see Bruce Wayne. He's going to sleep. It looks like he sleeps in the nude here, but I'm not 100% sure. No, I think he wears shorts. So he wakes up in the middle of the night and he sees the spirit of his dead parents here, and he calls out, "Dad, Mother," and they disappear. And we see Bruce Wayne. He's very confused at this moment. Because apparently, he wasn't expecting to see this. And he's thinking that it was probably a dream that he had. And at this point, he's not going to think about it much more. Now, this is some awkwardness. And this is again, plot convenience by Bob Hanley. It was Batman who rented the summer home. So this is not Bruce Wayne returning to the summer home. Because the problem is that if he returns as Bruce Wayne, he really doesn't have to costume up as Batman. In fact, it would be a problem for him if he costumed up as Batman. But to draw Batman as much as possible in this comic book, they fixed it so it was Batman who went to Bruce Wayne and rented the summer home. Because I guess Batman needs a break from being Batman, even though he vacations as Batman. And again, this makes no sense other than, plot convenience. But nevertheless, Batman, he's in full regalia. He's just walking around town, just kind of enjoying himself here. Some of the town folk, they have nothing better to do but gossip about the new guy. So they're talking about Batman's strange behavior last night, but they're noting that, hey, he looks pretty normal at this point. Summer day, he's a man, he's wearing a leather cowl, he has a leather cape, he has leather boots, leather gloves. And they're saying that guy kind of looking a little normal there. So we don't have anything to worry about with him. Oh, isn't he cruising with the Boy Wonder at this point? Nah. So anyway, there's an iron statue of old Emmanuel here. And it looks like he's about to harpoon, I guess, his meal for the night. I know the character of old Emmanuel, I think it was based on a Spencer Tracy character. I'm not sure whether it's Captain Courageous or Old Man in the Sea. But I remember reading that this character was based on one of those characters. But then Batman, suddenly out of nowhere, he leaps up and he grabs the harpoon from the iron statue. Because apparently they actually did not weld the harpoon to the main statue here. So it's free here. Batman has the iron harpoon and he throws it with great accuracy at a sign here, the Whale Inn. So he's kind of harpooning a whale.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And some of the town folk, they're taken aback by this because apparently this type of skill set is something they've only seen from old Emmanuel. And they're kind of wondering what's going on with Batman because now he's starting to replicate the physical movements of old Emmanuel too. So the the townfolk here, they immediately jump to the conclusion that Batman has to be possessed by Old Emmanuel. There's like no other explanation for it. So we have all these townfolk here. They're kind of, I guess, superstitious by nature, and they just happen to correctly guess exactly what's going on. And again, this was done for Bob Hanley's sake. This way, he didn't have to put any more effort into this story than he already did. So, kind of after this, it's kind of like after this seemingly strange, like Freaky Friday moment, at least from the townfolk point of view. It then it looks like Batman, who's being possessed by Old Emmanuel, he's heading toward the village lighthouse here, which is property of the U.S. government, and it has been closed for a couple years. We find that out later on. And apparently here we have a park ranger who's noticing that Batman is entering the premises here. And obviously, he's breaking the law here. So he wants to know what's going on. The park ranger, he gets to the top of the lighthouse. He already sees Batman. Batman is working on operating the beacon here at this point. I think the beacon has probably been shut down for a few years here. So Old Emmanuel, he's trying to figure out how to repair it and kind of get it operating again. Then it appears that Batman slugs, it doesn't appear, he does, he slugs the park ranger here with the right hand, kind of just knocking him out and just giving him a sore jaw at this point. But the thing is that immediately after Batman connected, he's suddenly back to himself. So Old Emmanuel had left his body at this point. And the thing is that when Batman is being possessed by Old Emmanuel, Batman has no memories of what's going on. So when Old Emmanuel is possessing Batman's body, the control is complete. He can't even recall the events of what was going on during this time. So now it kind of turns into my cousin Vinny here.
You wear?
I'm wearing clothes. I don't get the question.
When you come into my court looking like you do, you not only insult me, but you insult the integrity of this court.
And Batman, he's taken into municipal court, even though this is probably a federal offense. But nevertheless, he's taken into municipal court. He's informed by the judge that what he did was a serious crime, and that he'll have to put up bail, otherwise he'll be put in jail. But the thing is, Batman did not actually take any money with him. So he has his utility belt, but apparently he doesn't carry any spare cash in it, which would be one of the things that would make the most sense. So Batman is bat broke at this point. However, there's a voice from the courtroom that says, quote, "I'll go the Batman's bail." This is how badly this dialogue is written. I'll go the Batman's bail. And it turns out that poor English was spoken by Barry Allen, the Flash, who happens to be in this New England fishing village at the time. Batman, he's surprised to see Barry Allen. Now, Barry Allen is in his civilian clothing. So, before he got here, he made sure to go to LL Bean. So he's properly dressed for this environment. And Barry Allen, he kind of turns the question back on Batman, saying, I'd say the question is, what is Batman doing in court? So they're kind of like having this kind of light little banter between, Justice League teammates.
This is great banter. It really is.
So Barry Allen, he makes bail, and both Batman and Barry Allen, they walk out of the courthouse. Now, the thing is, Batman says, I'm being possessed by a spirit of an old fisherman that used to live and work in this village. He's just saying it straight out. This is what's happening as it's fact. Barry Allen, who apparently reads a lot of National Enquirer, he says, I've heard of such possessions, Batman. So Barry Allen, he's actually not very skeptical here, and he just simply accepts the explanation that, yeah, Batman's being possessed by a spirit. So the two of them are now on the beach. They're walking along the shore, and Barry Allen questions Batman about hitting that police officer. And Batman just totally pivots away from that, saying, all I can figure is, returning here to my parents' old summer home after all these years has upset me emotionally, but I'm not sure. So yeah, so Batman's flipping it, so he's the victim in this scenario. And then Batman's asking, hey Barry, what are you doing here? And the thing is, Barry is actually here on duty somewhat. And what had happened is that when he was working in his lab in Central City, and I think Central City is the analog for Los Angeles, though I'm not 100% sure. So Barry's kind of far off. Apparently Barry was using some of his electronic equipment, and he was starting to pick up some probes that was coming from the vicinity of this island. And the thing is, Barry wasn't quite sure what these probes were. He was thinking they could be infrarays, they could be cosmic rays, they could even be seismic tremors. So he wasn't quite sure what these emanations were, but he was picking up these strange emanations. And then it turns out that from his dot matrix printout, he was given the answer that these probes are coming from another dimension. So at this point, there's another dimension that's sending out, I guess, these probes seeking out what's going on in our current dimension, or at least DC Universe proper dimension. Sorry for that mangled explanation. And the thing is, Barry had triangulated the source of those rays to the Wayne summer home. So Barry was actually here independently of Batman. Now he's here because his scientific equipment picked up something, whereas Batman is here because he had a strong urge. So that sort of indicates that maybe old Emmanuel was sort of manipulating Bruce Wayne, because for whatever reason, the Bruce Wayne summer home is kind of a conduit between these two dimensions. And that's the only thing I can think of that's going on. Batman's pretty amazed here that Barry Allen had kind of figured out this is going on. All this is going on because of something in another dimension. And he's asking, do you know who or what is sending out these probes? Barry doesn't know. But the thing is, he took some time off from his job to investigate this. So the thing is that Batman asks a really stupid question here. So he knows that there's some type of interdimensional contact being made. He also knows that he's being possessed by the spirit of an old sailor in this fishing village. And Batman has to ask earnestly, do you think there's any connection between these two? This guy is the world's greatest detective, and yet he has to ask whether, is 1 + 1 2? Are you sure? So Barry, who's actually doing most of the detective work in this comic book, says, yeah, there probably is. And the thing is that since you're being possessed, and since you don't know when it happens, At this point on, you're going to have to stay in your Batman costume the entire time. And that includes when you sleep. So when Batman goes to bed, he's going to have the leather cowl on, he's going to have the leather cape, the boots, everything. Because the thing is that he can't take the risk of being possessed when he's Bruce Wayne. Because obviously when he starts walking around town, the town folk are going to figure out who Batman really is. So, but Barry Allen's going to kind of house sit with Bruce here. And then it turns out that Batman is somewhat possessed that night. But it's not actually old Emmanuel who's possessing him. It looks like he's under the control of his father's spirit. So his father's spirit is calling him down to the cellar. And it turns out that in the cellar, there's actually a secret laboratory that Thomas Wayne would conduct some experiments in. So at this point, it's becoming like Young Frankenstein with the when Dr. Frankenstein, he finds that secret lab of his long dead relative. Batman does recall that his father did have a scientific lab, but that he was never allowed to enter it as a boy. So this is actually the first time he's been inside this lab. Then we see that Batman comes across his dad's old scientific notes. This entry says, "Dear God, forgive me. I have opened the door, torn away the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead." So, so the thing is that Batman, he finds out that his father had been experimenting with the idea of returning the dead back to the living. So I guess he came up with this hypothesis that somehow when people die, they're sent to this other dimension, and he was looking to contact that dimension and then kind of bring people back. That doesn't seem like quite the experiment that a 1%er would be involved in. And at the same time, he's doing this at his summer home. So he's conducting these type of experiments on his vacation time. And again, it's just terrible the way Bob is just treating this character. And Batman thinks to himself, he was working on a method for doing just that. In fact, had set things up for such a return just before he was killed. Fantastic. What a dense fool I've been. These strange dreams. Old Emmanuel possessing me. They can only mean one thing. Mom and Dad are trying to come back now, trying to communicate with me. And again, this is how a 10-year-old thinks. He thinks that all of this is happening so Mommy and Daddy can come back to little Bruce here. So this guy has big-time parental issues here. And Batman's thinking that somehow old Emmanuel is the key to this. Somehow his parents trying to contact him from the dead, and these strange occurrences, and somehow old Emmanuel is somehow involved in this. But he doesn't quite know why. And the thing is, he wants to use old Emmanuel so that he can be reunited with his dead parents. So then Batman, he's starting to crack here at this point. He has the urn in his hand. Now it looks like he's about to open it. So I'm thinking at this point that he's so desperate for like parental contact that he's going to remove the Ashley remains from the urn, and just so he can kind of hug them and feel them and taste them and smell them, so he can be sort of reunited with his parents, at least in kind of a physical way. So he's crying out for that physical contact, and he'll take these Ashley remains, and yeah, that would be good enough for him. And again, this story is just truly horrible. So then we see the two heroes. They're at breakfast. Apparently, the Flash. I think he's going through the closets. So any clothing that Thomas Wayne had left in the summer home all those decades ago, the Flash is using them. I guess he's probably thinking, hey, they're a little dusty, but hey, this is some really nice material here. Batman, he has to stay in his full regalia because once again, he doesn't know when he'll be possessed by Old Emmanuel. Now the two are talking over coffee. I can imagine that at least the first half of the conversation involved these two shit-talking Superman. You figure Barry was griping about the fact that, he has the title, the fastest man alive. And every 2 or 3 years, he is forced into a race with Superman so Superman can take that title away from him. Superman is so entitled and so privileged that the fact that the Flash has this one little title that Superman doesn't have, Superman feels so inadequate about this. And this is getting on Barry's nerves. Batman, he has his own set of gripes against Superman. He's saying, listen, when they talk about the Superman-Batman team, they're really talking about the Batman-Superman team. And World's Finest, I'm the one who put those capital letters there, not him. So after about an hour or two of griping about what a dick Superman is, they suddenly go back into what's going on in the story. And Barry Allen, he's saying, Bruce, I understand your desire to contact your dead parents, but what if it should fail or backfire somehow? Batman, he's not thinking about the unintended consequences here. He's just saying, what have I to lose? What have I to lose, Barry? I've lost so much as a child, growing up alone. This is my chance to wash away those empty years. So at this point, Batman is not looking at the greater good, which is something that's not a very Batman thing to do. And I like how he's doing this over a cup of coffee, too. So Batman, he just wants a little alone time. So he goes out and he's walking along the beach here. And once again, he has to stay in full regalia. So he went to the beach wearing, leather boots and a leather cape. And his leather cowl, of course. And Barry Allen is thinking to himself, poor guy. Under that tough superhero hide is a sensitive, lonely man. But I've a hunch he's playing with fire. That this all connects with that mysterious dimension. Got to watch him. So then we see Batman. He's back in his dad's study. He's reading his dad's notebook. And again, he's trying to figure out the pieces because he knows there's something with this dimension, with the spirits, with the lighthouse, and with the lighthouse beacon. But he doesn't quite understand the connections at this point. So then the next panel it follows, we're at night now. Batman is possessed by Old Emmanuel, and he once again attempts to enter the lighthouse. And he knocks out the guard that's on duty here. But it turns out that Barry Allen is alerted to the fact that Batman is not here. He knows this is going on, that Batman is being possessed by some spirit. But at the same time, he's not really paying that much attention to actually watching over Batman. And Barry Allen, he notices that Batman's bed hadn't been slept in. Was Barry planning on getting into the bed with Batman? And he has looked around the summer home. He doesn't see any sign of Batman there. So then, of course, he's going to investigate, but he's going to investigate as the Flash. So he gets into his Flash persona, and he immediately heads toward the lighthouse. Now, as he's going up the stairs here, he does make note that the police guard was knocked out. So he knows that there's an unconscious policeman on the ground, but he has to check on Batman. So he's going up to the top of the lighthouse, and there he finds Batman, who is at this point possessed by old Emmanuel. And once again, old Emmanuel is seeking to fix the lighthouse beacon. So again, there's some type of tie-in between this other dimension and the need for this beacon to work. Otherwise, old Emmanuel wouldn't be spending all this time fiddling with it. Flash knows he has to stop Batman here, but he has to be very careful about it, because even though he knows Batman's being possessed by old Emmanuel, the body of Batman is still his friend. So he has to make sure he doesn't kill Batman in his attempt to stop him. So then the Flash knocks out Batman with a right uppercut here. Then he uses his super speed to get Batman out of the lighthouse, or at least the body of Batman out of the lighthouse. Now the thing is, there's an unconscious guard on the ground here, which Flash just leaves. He just leaves. Flash is not really a big back the blue guy here. And then it turns out that shortly afterwards, Barry Allen takes Batman, puts him back into bed, makes kind of like tucks him in, and the town chief, or the town constable, he arrives at the Wayne summer home, because he knows that's where Batman is. They know that he assaulted his first police officer in that lighthouse, and this is the second time it's happened. So this guy's kind of figuring out what's going on here. But the thing is, he comes up with some terrible deduction skills. And Barry Allen's saying, listen, it couldn't possibly be Batman. Look, he's sleeping. How could he have gotten back so quickly if he had been in the lighthouse there? And the constable's saying, I guess he couldn't have gotten back so fast. Must have been pranksters or vandals attacked that lighthouse guard. So at this point, Barry's sort of gaslighting the local law enforcement authorities here. So it's the next morning. The two men are arguing here. Barry at least gets to wear his comfortable LL Bean clothing here. Batman is stuck in that costume. He has been stuck in that costume for days. He's been sleeping in that costume. God knows how bad he smells, or how much he's sweating in that costume. But the thing is, Barry Allen's saying, listen, Bruce, I can't keep covering for you if you continue to break the law during these weird states, which kind of makes sense. But Batman, he's not concerned with the law here. He's saying, sorry, Barry, but I have no control over what I do when I'm old Emmanuel. So, hey, hey, dude, give me a pass here. Meanwhile, Batman has, he's at least the body of Batman has assaulted at least 2 police officers. The urn is out again here. Batman puts the urn back into the safe, and he says, I only know I must do what I have to if I'm to see my parents again. Think of the stakes, bringing them back. And so we get to see Batman is kind of being a bit possessive here. I should say obsessive here. Because all he cares about is sort of this bringing back his the spirit of his dead parents. So definitely at this point, this is kind of a Beetlejuice story here. Barry Allen, he's making the case that whatever experimentation Batman is doing, he needs to stop doing it. Because there are dangerous forces at work here, and there are unintended consequences. And Batman, with his obsession to see mommy and daddy again, he might be causing all types of harm. But Batman isn't hearing it. He's saying, "Stop it, Barry. I'm sure Dad's experiment won't backfire now. Please let me study his notebook." And so Batman's using the old nepotism card. "Barry's my dad. My dad wouldn't do anything bad." So again, this is really not doing a service to the character here, because Batman's kind of acting like a 10-year-old kid. And Barry realizes the gravity of the situation, that he basically has to stop Batman from continuing with his current mission, but nevertheless he knows that's going to be difficult. And Barry has come up with the hypothesis that there's some type of object that's in the home that's sort of the key between these two dimensions. So Barry is thinking that there's some type of MacGuffin that is bridging or can bridge these two dimensions, and is being used as an energy source. And what Barry's going to do is he's going to look for this energy source and see whether he can track it down or not. And he's going to do so as the Flash, because once again, this entire story could have been told without either one of them being in costume, except maybe the Flash, because he does have to protect his body from the Speed Force, and that's what his costume does. So anyway, we see the Flash. He's in his full regalia. Batman, he's in his full regalia. Batman's just quietly reading his dad's notes. The Flash, he's searching the entire summer home without Batman being aware of it. The Flash has not found anything close to what he would be looking for. And basically, he's looking for an object that could bridge two dimensions, which is a little bit vague to begin with. But then Flash comes across the cellar where Bruce Wayne's father's laboratory was. And he's thinking that maybe if I look through this door here, I can kind of figure out what I'm looking for. And then it turns out that immediately afterwards, Flash sweeps Batman off his feet and off that chair, and he has him in his arms. And no, it's not going to turn into that story. But what's happening is the Flash starts to vibrate at a very high speed, which in turn causes Batman's body to vibrate at a very high speed. And the two of them are heading toward the door of the laboratory. Batman thinks Flash is crazy, but Flash is saying, no, I have a hunch. Just follow me here. So the two bodies are vibrating at such a high frequency that they not only pass through the door, they actually pass into another dimension. So they're entering this second dimension here. And it kind of has, I guess you could say, a Hellraiser feel to it. So once again, Bob Hanley, he did a terrible job writing a comic book, but he did a pretty good job predicting some upcoming movies. And we see here again, the bodies of the two heroes are a bit distorted, so they have to adjust to being in this second dimension here. They do. Batman's confused as to why Flash took him to, quote, this forsaken place. And I guess it can be forsaken in terms of the eyes of a 1%er, because it doesn't look like a horrible place, but it looks kind of boring, to be honest. Batman's saying, oh man, my parents would hate being here. There's no fishing. There's no luxury dining or places to go. It looks like there are also other spirits in this dimension. And we see individuals who look like they're from the Roman Empire era. We see some Vikings and so forth. So this is sort of a kind of a dimension of where the unliving are at this point. And then we're given our first look at old Emmanuel here, he's actually not that old. He looks like he's in his early 40s. He's lived quite the life though, because he was a fisherman in the early 20th century. He has a wood peg for a right leg here. He also has an earring and a ponytail that you normally would associate with pirates at that time. So right now, Old Emmanuel is kind of like the Beetlejuice character, and it turns out that his spirit has the strongest pull with the other dimension. I guess because the thing is that the MacGuffin that is bridging these two dimensions, because the object is located in the Wayne Mansion, and because Old Emmanuel is a legend in this village, I'm guessing proximity is playing a lot of why Old Emmanuel is sort of the ringleader of what's going on in this, this unliving dimension here. Old Emmanuel, he's aware of Batman. He tells the others this. I'm not sure why someone who is from the Roman Empire would know anything about Batman. But apparently the plan for Old Emmanuel is they're all going to storm out of this dimension. Then they're going to possess the bodies of the living and then just kind of live their lives and just have a lot of fun. So this is basically the plan here. So it doesn't look like Old Emmanuel's kind of a world conqueror. He's just kind of a guy who wants to get out of this this kind of lukewarm hellhole, this limbo, and just kind of like have fun. So this is sort of like that movie, The Hidden. I think that came out in 1988. That is a good movie. Watch that movie if you haven't seen it. And there's also a little of Evil Dead here too. So anyway, Batman and the Flash, they're listening to Old Emmanuel here. So they figured out, they at least have located the ringleader here. And Flash is pointing out that Old Emmanuel at this point in time seems to be the only one who can kind of cross over from one dimension to another.
My wife and I would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure. Go ahead, shoot.
Well, for instance, what are your qualifications?
Well, I attended Juilliard. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it. Not to mention the fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think? You think I'm qualified?
And so this is sort of, again, like Ghost now. And but Batman isn't thinking about that at this point, because he sees the spirit of his two dead parents. They're both there, standing there silently, and Batman is saying, "Dad, Mother, it's me, Bruce, your son. Please, speak to me." Their faces, so sad. So I'm thinking at this point, maybe William Shatner has possessed Batman based on kind of like the speaking style. But nevertheless, it doesn't appear that the spirits of Bruce and Martha Wayne are directly interacting with Batman. So the thing is that Batman and the Flash, they're in this dimension. The spirits are in this dimension, but for whatever reason, the two can't directly interact. Batman can see the spirits, and the Flash can see the spirits, but the spirits can't see Batman and the Flash. So we see Batman, again, he's kind of acting like a 10-year-old. Little understandable, but still, he's kind of acting like a 10-year-old. Let me go. Let me embrace them. Touch them. And Flash has to be the cool, collected one here, because he noted that they have a time limit on how long they can stay in this dimension. And Flash knows that if they stay in this dimension longer than they're supposed to, they're going to end up stuck there. So at this point, Flash starts to vibrate his body, and he grabs a hold of Batman. And the way the two bodies are vibrating, they vibrate themselves back into the DC universe proper at this point. So the thing is, Flash is thankful that they had done this just in time. Otherwise, they would have been stuck in that dimension. The ads really aren't that interesting to me. See one for the sea monkeys here. I think the episode by South Park said everything you need to know about these sea monkeys. And the top ad here looks to be for kind of like these motorbikes or go-karts, or dirt bikes, I should say. And yeah, this is when stuff like this was starting to become really popular. So anyway, both Batman and the Flash, they have a lot more new information. However, they differ in terms of what to do with this information. The Flash says, we have enough information here to kind of stop doing these crazy experiments of yours. And we should, slow this stuff down, and we should try to figure out how to close that dimensional gap by, finding this MacGuffin that's somehow in this house. Batman, he's taking the opposite tack. He's saying, listen, I need to free my parents from that hellish place. That place was not a place for one percenters. And I don't like the idea of my parents' spirits being stuck in that purgatory there. Their money should have already bought them a place in heaven, no matter what they did on earth. So that's the point of view Batman's taking. So he wants to continue with his dad's experiments in hoping to free his parents from that dimension. And so Batman is actually wanting old Emmanuel to possess him, because he's like, listen, if old Emmanuel needs to possess my body to make this happen, I'm fine with it. So Batman, he's all in terms of what's going on. The Flash, he's concerned with his friend and teammate. He's never heard him acting so childishly. He's never seen him acting so determined. So Flash knows that if he's going to have to stop this, he's going to have to do without the Batman's help. But he still needs answers on, where to find this MacGuffin. And it turns out that the undertaker of the morgue who took care of the funeral arrangements for Thomas and Martha Wayne is actually in this area. He's in the Boston area. Apparently, when Thomas and Martha were murdered, they were not buried in Gotham as every other DC Comics, basically states. But apparently their earthly remains were taken to this New England village, or at least to Boston, and they eventually were cremated into their Ashley remains, and they were put in an urn. So the Flash is thinking, hey, maybe the Undertaker has some ideas that could help me figure out where this MacGuffin is. And again, this is a huge leap of faith. But it turns out that Barry is going to pursue this. He's going to pursue this, this line of evidence. And it turns out that Barry, he arrives at the nursing home. The Undertaker, who had taken care of this, is elderly and infirmed. He's had a couple of strokes. He's not verbally communicative, I should say. So while his mind is fine, he really can't communicate too well with Barry Allen here. I would kind of think this is similar to the scene in Breaking Bad with with the elderly drug dealer and the bell on his wheelchair. So anyway, Barry says he's been explaining everything to this guy. This guy looks like he doesn't know where he is. But then we see the old Undertaker. He's scratching out something on the armrest of his wheelchair here. So we can assume here he's trying to communicate with Barry. So Batman here, he's looking at the sun going down, and he's prepared to have his body possessed, so old Emmanuel can take over and then kind of head back to the lighthouse. And that's exactly what happens. Old Emmanuel takes possession of Batman, and Batman, the body of Batman, is heading toward the old lighthouse. It turns out that the authorities had doubled the guards from 1 to 2 to watch over the lighthouse, because they had caught Batman there at least twice, up to no good, or at least they caught him once there, and there was some second shenanigans. So anyway, we see Batman. He's able to swing past these 2 guards with ease. He's climbing up the side of the lighthouse here. He reaches the inside of the lighthouse. He sees the lighthouse beacon, and then I guess old Emmanuel kind of swings out of the lighthouse. So we're not given much information between these 2 panels. This again was a real shortcut by Bob Hanley. I guess he needed to get the story in so many pages. The police officers, they see the silhouette of Batman swinging away. They start firing on him here. But nevertheless, even though Batman has the movements of old Emmanuel, with the stiff leg and that, nevertheless he's able to avoid the gunfire here. Now the Flash returns to the island after his Boston visit, and it turns out the townfolk are there, and the townfolk, they have torches lit and everything. So again, kind of like Young Frankenstein. So at this point, the townfolk, they're looking for Batman. They know Batman's being possessed by old Emmanuel, and they want to kill Batman. So there's going to be like no attempt whatsoever to try to free Batman of this possession. Kind of like there's going to be no exorcist for Batman. They're just going to murk him. And the townfolk, they're very angry. They're not listening to anyone. So they're on a search and destroy mission for Batman. The Flash sees this, and he has to figure out what to do, because not only does Flash have to talk his old friend out of these experiments, he has to make him aware that these townfolk, they're looking for him. Then suddenly the light from the lighthouse is activated. Looks like old Emmanuel finally got the beacon working. So the light is on. The Flash is noting this. He's noting that the lighthouse had not been active for years, and now suddenly it is. And then we see kind of a ghostly army, kind of slowly just leaving their dimension of the unliving and entering the DC universe proper. So at this point, the undead have reached the realm of the living, and they're all headed toward the house. At this point, we see Batman here. He's no longer possessed by old Emmanuel. Old Emmanuel is leading the army of the spirits, so he doesn't need to possess the Batman's body at this point. Batman, he's looking at the portrait of his father, and he's thinking to himself, "Well, Dad, I did everything to make your return possible. Now I wait to embrace you and Mother after all these long empty years." So the thing is, he has the urn. There actually remains on the table here. Batman is thinking that nothing but good things are going to happen. Batman, this kind of describes what's going on in the world. where people have these harebrained notions, and they think these harebrained notions are going to work exactly the way they want it to work. And the Flash, he breaks in, he tells Batman that no, reality does not work this way. That there are unintended consequences, and one of the unintended consequences, you know, that I warned you about was that there's a whole army of spirits from this other dimension currently entering ours. And Batman is actually arguing this point with the Flash. So Batman is arguing reality with the Flash, saying, no, only my parents will be brought back. What proof do you have of this, that it's going to work that way, other than wishful thinking? And again, this is where the Batman character is ruined, because this is wishful thinking on Batman's part. Flash says, it didn't work that way. I know now why, as Manuel, you kept going to the lighthouse to fix it. The beam's power was needed to draw the spirit beings from the sea. So apparently, the gateway to this dimension is located somewhere, you know, on the sea, in the sea, under the sea. I don't know what. But nevertheless, this is the location. So the light from the beacon was needed as kind of a power source. Okay, take a look at this one ad here. It's just for a Superman poster. It's a 6'2" poster, so there's actually a lot of paper involved with this. And you also get another poster too, and they're selling the posters for about $2. The bigger one is $2. The other one, the smaller one, is $1.50, and postage and handling was 25 cents. These prices seem really low. So I'm not quite sure that if any kid had sent some money in, I'm not sure he got his product. That happened a lot with Marvel Mania products. So if you ever see those old ads thinking, God, I wish I were back then, I would have given them $1.50, they more than likely would not have sent you anything. Oh, Marvel Mania had actually nothing really to do with Marvel. It was just this kind of weird crank businessman who approached Marvel with some type of distribution deal. Take a look at the in-house ad. The first one is for an issue of Superman, which is one of those 100-page giants for 50 cents. I love buying those. I made my mom buy so many of them, but I was always sort of disappointed with them because they were mostly reprints, and they were mostly reprints from an era that I really wasn't interested in. Like I don't really care too much about the Golden Age, and there's a lot of Silver Age stuff I didn't really care too much for. As many of these as I bought, I was usually disappointed with them. And the second comic they're bring our attention to is Strange Adventures. This was one of the anthology comics from DC. This was an anthology comic that had more of a science fiction bent to it than a horror bent to it. And occasionally they would have a shorter, like, Adam Strange story. Because, again, if it was somewhat futuristic, it was usually in Strange Adventures. You see this kind of, again, it's like a Twilight Zone story here. So once again, Batman, he's in complete denial. He's calling the Flash a liar. You're lying. All along, you thought my wish was to be reunited with my parents was wrong. And Flash, you know, he has to talk to 10-year-old Batman here, saying, lying, am I? Then look for yourself, if you dare. You know, my readings of dialogue is worse than Guy Gadot's.
And enough champagne to fill the Nile.
And then Batman, he sees the evidence of of these things that are now seen to him, and he realizes that he had made a mistake. And he sees the army of spirits, and then he does a very un-Batman-like move at this point. He starts crying. Yes, he is crying. He has both his hands covering his face, crying, going, "What have I done?" But the Flash is there. He's the cool, calm, collected one. He's saying, "Nothing that can't be undone. And I think I know how." Now, the thing is, the spirits are actually knocking at the door. So there's no type of siege coming from the spirits. The spirits are actually lined up here, and they're very politely waiting to walk through the door. So apparently for them, for this type of interdimensional trip to be permanent, they need to enter the Wayne summer home. But they're actually not going to force their way into it. They're going to use the Jehovah's Witness way of just simply knocking at your door and asking if you're in, and just wanting to talk to you about Jehovah. So I'm not quite sure how effective this is, because on one hand, the heroes don't have to worry about a fight here, but on the other hand, they might really be annoyed with all that knocking. And the spirits are like, "We just want to talk about Jehovah. Open up." And then it seems like Batman himself is being possessed. And this sort of matches the cover that we see. And Batman, he's sort of starting to look like Two-Face. He's split into two personalities. Batman is telling the Flash to murk him, to take him off the senses, if it means stopping this. He's saying, "Listen, we got to stop these JVers somehow. And if it means my life, so they're knocking on one less door, so be it." However, the other side of Batman, he's like, "No, don't believe that. I won't open it." So, I don't, again, there's not much care put into this comic, so I actually don't know what that dialogue is referring to. I think that he would actually want that door opened. The Flash, the knocking is getting on his nerves. He's thinking those goddamn JVers, and the Flash is thinking he's possessed again. But this time he's fighting back to keep it from taking him over. Two identities warring inside of him, and this is sort of how it's playing out. Flash is thinking, but one identity speaks with old Emmanuel's voice and can't be trusted. The urn, I must destroy it. So Flash has the idea that he needs to destroy the urn at this point. And there's no evidence that there was any problem with the urn, but nevertheless he has this idea. Batman sees it. The Batman half of the body is saying, "Do what you must, Flash." However, the part of him that's possessed by old Emmanuel is saying, "Touch my parents' sacred ashes? Never." And then that part of Batman grabs a kind of a heavy lamp, and he basically just slaps it over the Flash's head here. So he's looking to give Flash a concussion, if not worse. And at this point, because the Flash has his protected costume on, he wasn't knocked out completely, but he is woozy here. Now, Batman, who is totally possessed by old Emmanuel at this point, he's going to turn and he's going to answer that door. He is a JVer's dream. He's going to answer that door. He's going to say, "Tell me all about Jehovah. I got all day." The Flash, he definitely wants to stop this from happening. So then he reaches for the urn. He grabs the ashy remains of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and he throws the urn to the ground. And it turns out that they do not have the ashy remains of Thomas and Martha Wayne. It turns out that there's a black Egyptian diamond in here. So there's actually sand with this Egyptian diamond in it. The knocking of the door is still going on. So old Emmanuel, he's kind of taking his time opening this door. And it looks like he's about to reach for the doorknob here. He's about to open the door to allow the spirits to come from their dimension to this dimension, or at least the DC Universe dimension. Flash, he grabs this Egyptian artifact because it's a diamond in the shape of an Egyptian goddess. Flash takes it and he throws it into orbit. I didn't know the Flash was this strong. But nevertheless, he's able to throw this meteorite out of Earth's orbit. And again, displaying a power he's never displayed before. That is textbook plot convenience. And then Batman is back to himself. The spirits are gone. And everything is right. And Batman, he's opening the door. He's saying, "Dad? Mother? No one at all." And then he thinks, "Oh, my head feels like I just had awakened from a nightmare." So at this point, the spirits have been driven out. Basically, they said Beetlejuice 3 times, and the spirits are gone. Then Batman here, he's on his knees. He sees the urn is broken, but he doesn't see the actually remains of his parents. Instead, he sees sand, because again, this is an Egyptian artifact. What are you going to fill it with? Sand. And basically, the Flash had this information from the old Underkeeper, who knew of some type of switcheroo where the actually remains of Thomas and Bruce Wayne were taken out of that urn and they were replaced with this Egyptian diamond. For some inexplicit reason, Batman, he's expressing some sorrow, saying, "How close to disaster I came. Forgive me, Flash, and thanks." And Flash is explaining that the clues that solved this terrible mystery he got from the old Undertaker. And the idea was that this diamond was going to be hidden in the urn of Bruce Wayne's parents, because Bruce Wayne would never knowingly destroy an object that had his parents' Ashley remains. I have no idea what the motive was for this. Why would they care that 13-year-old Bruce Wayne would come across this, Egyptian diamond? Oh, wait. Oh, I think it's part of his dad's experiments. His dad, they're saying now that his dad was using the diamond as a source for contacting these two dimensions. And I think it was probably written in the will that should we die, you're to take this object, use our urn to put this object in there and give it to our son so he can unwittingly safekeep it, because he would never open our Ashley remains. So again, this story is just horrible. And now Batman, he's left to contemplate the fact that his parents' spirit are kind of stuck in that ghostly dimension, because apparently that was his father's punishment for dealing with these powerful unknown forces, and they just took his wife along with him. And Flash is kind of being a dick here, because he's being really condescending to Batman. As he's talking about his parents being stuck in that other dimension, Flash is saying, "Perhaps because your father dared to tamper with what must remain separate, the living and the dead worlds." That is some really bad dialogue. and a really bad reading for me. And Batman's saying, so after Flash is being kind of like a condescending jerk, kind of rubbing his face in the ashes, Batman's saying, you know, I don't even have their ashes now. But Flash says, no, you do. Because it just happened to turn out that there was a second urn. And that second urn had the ashes of your parents. And it just turned out that the Undertaker, who had buried your parents all those years ago, he actually kept it there. Batman's thinking, hey, this is a little convenient. And then he's starting to look around the summer home, and he's noticing that all the ashtrays have been cleaned out. And Flash is saying, don't think about it, dude. Just don't think about it. And accept this as your parents' Ashley remains. It would be something else if Batman kind of like opened up the urn and he kind of just held those Ashley remains, maybe get some of them on his costume, and when he's fighting crime, he can just grab the face of a criminal and just rub them into the stains and saying, do you feel that, punk? Do you taste that, punk? Do you smell that, punk? Those are the remains of my parents. I think crime would end overnight in Gotham City because the headlines would be Batman has cracked. So then we see a kind of somewhat farewell as kind of the silhouettes of Thomas and Martha Wayne show up in Batman's bedroom here as he's asleep. So the parents are saying goodbye to their son as he's sleeping. So that might be an indicator that they realize that on some level, you know, we failed as parents here. But Thomas Wayne says to his son, his sleeping son, Bruce, our son, it's over. We failed to return to your world, but destroying the diamond freed us from the netherworld. We've reached the land of eternal peace at last. So his parents are like, free at last, free at last. And they end with this one note. And yes, son, Superman is a dick. So then it's the next morning. This is really screwed up. So the two men, they decide to leave. Batman, of course, he has to leave in his full regalia, just so no one finds out that he's Bruce Wayne. Barry Allen, he's in his comfortable LL Bean clothing here. And Barry's telling Batman, the local authorities went along with my escorting you off the island to seek psychiatric help. And Batman is saying, that's only half a lie, Barry. I really could use a head shrinker after this vacation. Some interesting things about this. One, the term head shrinker was a kind of a slur that was directed toward psychiatrists. Back then, there was still a real stigma about seeing a psychiatrist. So whenever people were saying, hey, you know, I'm seeking, you know, professional help for my mental health, you know, they would think you were a nut. And the other thing is, there is at least one municipality that says that Batman has agreed to get some psychiatric help. So I think that's kind of interesting here. And Batman, he leaves the story by saying, but seriously, I've also found peace at last. I'm no longer haunted by my orphan childhood. Killing my past by finally putting the ghost of my parents to rest has freed me. Goodbye, Dad, Mom, goodbye, house. And that's how the story ends, with Batman thanking his material property, the house, last. And again, this kind of just ruins Batman, because the whole driving force around Batman is, of course, he never got over the murder of his parents. But here, he's like, hey, you know, this was a weird Iron John retreat, but nevertheless, you know, I'm free at last. And that's the end of this really horrible story. Oof. So anyway, I'm going to skip. I told you I was going to skip the Viking Prince story. I'm going to take a look at this one ad. It's for SSP cars. These were cars. I had a few of these. Basically, what they were cars, but in the middle of the car, there was a large wheel, and the toy came with kind of a zip strip, and you would insert the zip strip into one of the gears, and then you would pull the strip, and then the wheel would start spinning, and that's how the car would move. They actually move fairly fast. And this one is for the Smash Up Derby. See some more ads, not terribly interesting ones. Take a look at this one in-house ad for the House of Secrets. Beautiful Neil Adams cover here. So I'm going to take a look at the letters page. And there's some interesting stuff here. There's a lot of editorial notes. So there's more editorial notes than there are actual letters. And the editors are talking about the fact that the next issue will be the 100th issue of Brave and the Bold. Now, normally DC did not make a big deal about milestone issues like this, like the 100th issue or the 50th issue or the 200th issue. That was something that was started by Marvel, and Marvel found a lot of success in terms of marketing their comics. You know, this is the 50th issue, this is the 100th issue. And DC started following suit around this time. So we have the upcoming 100th issue of Brave and the Bold. And apparently there was sort of a split amongst the fan base. Some of the fans wanted Batman to be paired off with maybe some of Jack Kirby's new Third World characters, such as Mr. Miracle or, Orion and Light Ray, or the Forever People. And there were other fans who were saying no, they wanted sort of the standard classic DC characters to be paired off with Batman for that special 100th issue. They ended up settling on Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and Black Canary, which was understandable because that was during the Neil Adams run. And DC very much wanted to save that title. So that's why they were experimenting with relevancy at the time. And I guess DC figured that, hey, we'll give these characters as much exposure as possible. So for the 100th issue, they went with that. But it was interesting how they were talking about some of the issues involving using Jack Kirby's characters. In that they probably would not have Jack Kirby doing the 100th issue. So they were wondering how to adapt Kirby's characters, because obviously Kirby had a distinct art style. And one of the things was that his characters tended to be very muscular. And they weren't quite sure that the artists who were normally taking care of Brave and the Bold, which would have been Jim Aparo, which would have been Bob Brown or Nick Cardy, how well they would handle translating these sort of characters that are drawn in a distinct way in a more conventional way. Eventually, they ended up using Mr. Miracle, and he just basically looked like any other character that was drawn by Jim Aparo. But yeah, that apparently the art style was a concern for DC editors. Let's see what else they're mentioning here. They're also mentioning someone asked a question on whether there were any college graduates on DC's writing staff, and it turns out there's quite a few. Carrie Bates came from Ohio University. Mike Friedrichs came from the University of Santa Clara. Elliot Magden came from Brandeis University, and one of their editors, Bill Boltnoff, came from Boston University. And another reason they're mentioning this is that they've noted that they've been receiving a large number of unsolicited story ideas and story scripts. So there might have been a case where somewhere someone was telling aspiring writers in college that if they have any story ideas, they might want to write into DC and particularly Brave and the Bold, and give them these unsolicited story ideas or story scripts. I'm thinking that's probably what happened. Someone might have been trolling DC, saying, "Listen, I've been reading Brave and the Bold. These stories are really bad. Case in point with this one." And they might have been kind of encouraging college kids to give it a shot and saying, "Hey, those ideas can't be any worse than the crap they're publishing." So DC editorial is kind of asking these readers to kind of stop it. But they also don't want to discourage anyone either. And they said that, listen, if you have a really good idea that you really think is worth considering, just, send us a synopsis, send us a self-addressed stamp so we can legally answer you. So in case, we're accused of, some type of plagiarism. And we'll give you an evaluation of what we think about this story. And they're also pointing out that whenever they decide on a story, it's done in conference. So the writer will give an idea, will pitch an idea to an editor, then the two of them will kind of hash it out on how to proceed if they decide to go with that story. There's kind of a letter on issue number 97. That's a Dead Man issue. And they're also talking about the Spectra and the rebirth of that character. That character did show up in Brave and the Bold about a year later. And the reboot of that character is amazing. Those comic books, when they brought back the Spectra, were so violent. And even by today's standards, the amount of mean-spirited violence in those issues is kind of stunning. And I remember reading those when I was like 7 years old. So they're talking a lot about the Spectra and Dead Man. And then the last letter is about Plastic Man. And they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to come out with something with Plastic Man. They never did. Even though Plastic Man actually got his own cartoon show on ABC Saturday morning. And that looks to be about it. And that is my review of Brave and the Bold, issue number 99. And I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.